Okay, welcome back to Treasury Online. My name is Antti Pekkala, and throughout today's sessions, we've talked about systems, visibility, strategy. But sooner or later, every good idea meets the same moment, the executive decision. It's actually quite rare to speak with someone who has truly seen treasury decisions from the very top level. And that's why I'm especially happy to welcome Rick Medlock. Rick is board chair at Nomentia and a former CFO of two FTSE 100 companies, along with numerous venture capital-backed businesses. He's someone who has sat on the side of the table where the final yes or no happens. Rick, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's kick off with the first question. Let's imagine you are a CFO, which shouldn't be too hard given your background. A treasurer walks into your office, says, "We need a treasury management system." What would make you instinctively say no?
Well, I would never instinctively say no. That wasn't my style. And I think if a treasurer comes to you with that request, I think the first question is more likely to be why. CFOs fundamentally, CFOs don't like spending money. They don't like big IT projects. I mean, we've seen them over the years as really disruptive, expensive, time consuming, carrying a lot of risks. And we've also, as a finance organization, we have to be the paragons of fiscal discipline or financial discipline in the organization. So for us to invest in a new technology and a new platform, we really have to be convinced of the benefits of that, because if we don't set a high bar, we can't expect the rest of the organization to follow, cost and capex discipline and control. So for us, the bar to committing capital expenditure needs to be high. If you came with that question to me into my office, I would need to understand why what you're doing today isn't fit for purpose. What's the benefits of the new system, or what are the risks that I'm going to incur as the CFO by you carrying on not having a system? So it's much more a why, not a no.
Okay, I think that's a perfect time for an audience poll. So, if you were to make a case for transformation, your primary argument would usually be efficiency and time savings, automation and modernization, risk reduction, financial impact, and predictability. As a CFO, how much visibility do you really have into Treasury's day-to-day pains?
Very little, in all honesty. I think most CFOs don't come through the Treasury background. They might not have even had any experience of working in a Treasury function. I'd been a public company chief financial officer for 8 years before we ever raised any public debt and had a proper treasurer. So the understanding of what's going on in the day-to-day is very limited for most CFOs, I would say.
Would it be fair to say that if problem is invisible to you, it effectively doesn't exist?
No, that's not true. I would say good CFOs talk to their teams regularly about what the barriers are for them to being successful. What problems do they have? I mean, I always wanted my finance organization to be a well-oiled machine so that we could really serve the business, and we would then deliver real value in terms of decision-making, operations, strategy of the business. That was our real job. And my job as CFO was always to help my people and my team be the best it could possibly be and make sure it was a well-oiled machine. So for me, I was on the lookout for problems. I would spend my time talking to my direct reports about the things that were barriers to them being successful and seeing how I could unlock that. I mean, I was the strategic decision maker. I was at the leadership team table. If we needed my support to get things done, I needed to know what the issues and problems were. So that was what I would be very open to. So no, if it's not visible, it definitely does exist. I just haven't found it yet.
What do you think treasurers overestimate how much CFOs understand about the mechanics of treasury?
Look, I think good treasurers, in their DNA, they try to avoid surprises, and they generally get things done in a really quiet and unfussy way. They don't, in my experience anyway, they don't usually share their pain, and to some extent they can be a little bit of a black box as well. I think what good treasurers need to do, they need to remember that CFOs are not treasurers. And we do need to be educated on the mechanics of the challenges. I mean, one of the best treasurers I worked with was quite painstaking in explaining to me some of the nuances of getting from A to B. I only wanted the outcome, the B, but he needed to explain to me the bits along the way that need to happen so that I was familiar with the process, so I could understand his pain and to understand why sometimes things might not go smoothly. Once I understood that, I was always a demanding CFO, and all CFOs are generally, but at least I understood what could go wrong or what might take time, and help him get through that.
Can you think of a time when a treasury team surprised you in a positive way? For example, surfacing an issue before it became a problem.
I think a lot of the time the treasurers were looking ahead and trying to work out, particularly in the capital structure, where we might face bottlenecks, as long as they understood the strategy of the business. And I think it's one of the key things that treasurers need to get involved across the whole business, not just in their narrow treasury function. Need to understand the strategy of the business. Often most people think of that as M&A, but it isn't always. It's capital investment. It's also foreign currency risk. It's also the dynamics of our supply chain and what could change in that. All of that they need to understand. And I think the good treasurers I've worked with were good at sort of looking and saying, look, we listened to the strategy presentation, we talked to the head of M&A, we talked to the head of the IT organization, chief information officer. We've seen these issues. If we do that, we need to think about what we need to do. I mean, I go back to probably a case where we were moving in my satellite business when I was at Inmarsat. We were moving a land station from the UK, I think, to Italy. It's a big foreign currency issue to do with that transaction and a big capital program. And to some extent, the finance organization, we hadn't actually considered some of the risks and costs of that. And the treasury function were actually brilliant in identifying that as a risk and an issue, and then working out how we could mitigate that risk. That was something we hadn't thought about, I hadn't thought about, and actually Treasury came up very well with thinking about that.
A poll for the audience. How often does your CFO challenge your numbers? Rarely? Occasionally? Frequently? Or almost always? We often hear about treasurers talk about efficiency, automation, time saved. Why does that rarely unlock budget on the CFO level?
We're cynical, CFOs are, and we've often heard that. Well, we've heard that story countless times. The latest IT project, and it's usually somewhere else in the organization, is going to deliver all these benefits. They're going to spend a lot of time, and then you end up, we end up having no delivery of those benefits. We have to spend a lot of time on postmortems as to why things were late, why they were over budget, why they didn't deliver the often nebulous benefits promised, and therefore, we are to some extent sort of cynical about those things. And it's really important that you can truly demonstrate what is really going to happen with this new system that you're going to put in. What is going to be different? What is going to either free up time, reduce cost, reduce risk? You've got to be, treasurers are numerate and precise people, and therefore bring that numeracy and precision to your benefit statement.
Okay, so what words or arguments immediately put you on the defensive?
Strategic. So strategic usually means no one has actually worked out what the benefits are, but they know it's a good thing in the long run. So that's always a worry. When people say headcount or time saving, often they claim it's not in their area, it's in someone else's. Of course, then they're not responsible for delivering that. So I see that as an issue. Now, what I would say is that usually Treasury functions don't have a huge headcount. So I wouldn't really expect to see a lot of headcount reduction in a Treasury function by putting a Treasury system in. But what I would hope to see is the switch of time from more mundane process, clerical transactions into actually freeing up really bright, sharp treasurer mind to be able to work on the real business problems. Go back to my point about treasury organizations need to be much more connected to the business. If you can use a treasury system to free up your sort of boring work time into really good understanding the business, that might give you an extra, 2 or 3 hours a week to get out and talk to with other people in the organization to understand how sales really works, how the supply chain really works, how tech projects are run, how utilization of staff works in services organizations. All those things which you might say, well, there's no real benefit to Treasury. It's a huge benefit to Treasury because Treasury then understands the organization a ton better rather than just sitting in their office and hoping things will come to them.
In your experience, when does a Treasury project proposal start sounding like an IT project rather than a financial one?
Yeah, and obviously that's a real worry because certainly as a CFO, I don't want my projects to be IT projects as such. I mean, I get again, these are red flags. When you hear people talking about customization of solutions, that's a real red flag because customization creates a lot of problems down the line. I don't really like platform change. If you've already committed to one ERP system and it's on one technology and it's in the cloud, what you don't want is someone coming in with a different platform that's going to create a lot of problem. You don't want a lot of integration with other systems. If there's a whole load of work have to be done, often by the IT organization, or even worse, we have to bring third-party consultants like PwC, McKinsey, or Accenture to come in and help you do all that. These are all things where you just think this is a mega big IT project. It's going to be complex, and you then go, there's multiple phases. Often, and not just as a CFO, but as a member of a leadership team or a board director, you hear about, well, phase one, we're going to do X. You then know there's going to be a phase 2 and phase 3. That's a very long project. You then bought into it. You then got to commit to it. Those are all the things that you start to think, this is just going to be an endless IT project. I don't want to be supporting it.
Okay, so what does get the CFO's attention when Treasury asks for a TMS or other systems?
Well, I would be looking for a number of things. I mean, first of all, for me, it would be better, more accurate, and more flexible forecasting. That I think is probably number one. Better understanding of risk and the quantification of that risk, enabling us to make decisions quicker so that we don't have to wait for a whole load of reports to come out from banks and crank a load of data and run them through a load of spreadsheets with the risk of error. Everything like that. Anything you can make those decisions quicker is really, really helpful. I always was very keen to automate reporting, things like hedge accounting, which can often be a side product of what Treasury does, but utterly vital to the finance organization, finance controller organization, finance reporting team. And of course, reducing costs. One of the things that I think finance CFOs think is an evil, but I suppose a necessary evil, is bank charges, higher interest costs than are necessary, lowering working capital, preventing trapped cash, earning high returns on the cash we've got. Anything like that is something that I think that gets me excited.
Okay, poll for the audience. How many times can you realistically answer, I don't know, to your CFO before credibility erodes? Is it never? Once? A couple of times? Or does it depend on the context? How do risk, predictability, and, well, let's call it no surprises, factor into the thinking of a CFO?
Well, I'll go back to what I said earlier on. I mean, for me, I wanted a finance organization that was a well-oiled machine, which could do everything about the basics that we in a finance organization had to do, whether it's tax, payments, treasury, credit control, forecasting, FP&A. You want it all to run as a well-oiled machine, because once you have a well-oiled machine, you don't spend your time trying to fix the process. You're able to use your brain. And we got a lot of bright people in the finance organization. We want to use that brain to help the organization be better. We're a service to the rest of the organization, and we're part of the team. So for us, actually using our analytics capability and the massive amount of data, and remember, in the finance organization, we generally see everything that goes on in the organization. So we are the best placed to help the organization. I want to be a value added service. I want people to love finance and be seen as genuinely as a business partner. So to me, lower risk, we're not putting the organization at risk for the things that we're in charge of. And we are helping the organization understand risk far better. I want to remind everyone when we're just talking about this that businesses only make profit by taking risk. Profit is the reward for taking risk. So we want to take risk. That's how you drive shareholder value. But you have to understand that risk, and you have to manage it properly. So you have to understand the various components and the finance risk, and the operational risk that comes with how the structure of deals and finances work is really critical. So I want to have as better understanding as I possibly can. We'll never eliminate risk, and we shouldn't. Risk is good, but we need to understand it and make decisions that support the right levels of risk that the organization wants to undertake.
Okay, to put a final button on this, which matters more, saving money or avoiding bad outcomes?
Oh, avoiding bad outcomes trumps cost saving every time. There's an English phrase that we have, which, forgive me for using, I don't know whether people will get this, but don't sink the ship for a ha'porth of tar. And a ha'porth is a halfpenny, or the equivalent of a euro cent. So it's like, don't sink the ship because you just failed to do a little bit of cost management of keeping your ship safe. So for me, absolutely, I would invest money to avoid bad outcomes.
What would you say is the difference between information that's interesting and information that's decision ready for a CFO?
Interesting, I would say, generally means that there is a mass of data that I have to wade through, whether they are numbers, tables, possibly graphs. So it's a long, detailed presentation. The information's there. It's interesting because I know there are kernels in it, and it's a topic that probably I want to hear about, but it wastes a lot of time, and I have to plow through it. And you can tell me now, in the world of AI, I could run an AI engine to go over it and give me the summary. But personally, I think that's the job of my team, to present me with the key facts, the information that enables me to understand the pros and cons clearly laid out with the options and the risks. Once I've got that, I can make decisions. And, I think CFOs like to make decisions and get on with things. That, having things hang around and not be made a decision, that's ambiguity, that's uncertainty, which makes it difficult to lead. And you want to make sure your team has clarity. So to be able to make a decision, it's great when you can do that quickly. If you really have to spend a lot of time and keep going back and asking for more data, more questions, that's when it gets frustrating.
So, where do treasurers tend to over-explain and where do they under-explain?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky, I think, because I don't find that treasurers over-explain stuff. I think the opposite is true. I often think, we go back to that black box, I think the treasurers sometimes don't like to open the black box and explain the mechanics behind, say, a hedging strategy or the real reason for the term of the instrument that they're proposing, just as a couple of examples. And I'm going to be a little bit provocative now in the thing, and I know the audience for this is treasurers, but I sometimes wonder whether treasurers are simply introverts who shun the limelight, and don't really want to sort of have the attention on them, so don't really want to explain it or lead on something, or actually whether they want to sort of remain as sort of fairly inscrutable academic experts in their field and preserve a mystique. And so it's a little bit of a provocative thing. And so, as I said, I've been lucky working with good treasurers. It's sort of teasing that out of them, but giving them the confidence to come and talk to me and present their case and be on the front foot. And actually, CFOs, I think, really like that.
What makes you trust that the Treasury is truly in control?
It's that openness, to be honest, to come and debate stuff with your CFO. We obviously have to totally trust them and believe that they are reliable and have everything as much as possible under control. So that's the sort of given. And if you can't demonstrate that to your CFO, you certainly won't get his or her trust. But I think, the treasurer should come and challenge the CFO on some stuff as well. The treasurer has a very good lens on the dynamics and implications in the capital structure, in the external market with lenders, with counterparties, etc. So come and challenge your CFO and go, look, Rick, you're going to make this decision here. Do you understand the implications with our relationship with our lead bank or our secondary banks or our bank in a local jurisdiction? You need to be proactive and come and be provocative and challenge the CFO. So I think that is a real help in understanding trust, because it shows understand and care about the business and understand the risks. I go back to my point I made earlier on. I trust my treasury function if I really feel they understand the business and they've already built good relationship with the rest of the business. So because that means they're well informed, they can understand, and they're part of the finance army that is the eyes and ears out in the field of the business. No CFO can understand all parts of the business at all times. You need your whole organization being out there in the business, listening to what is happening, getting feedback, our people building good relationships with people in the marketing organization, the sales organization, the development organization, so that those relationships can unlock learnings for our team, and then bringing that back in and sharing it. Again, if a treasury function finds great information out in the business, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your finance colleagues, share it with the group CFO, share it with the head of tax, and obviously share it with your CFO. So, really important to do that.
Just one more poll. What has historically stopped transformation investment in your organization? Is it the budget constraints, competing IT priorities, lack of clear return on investment, or lack of urgency or visible pain? So let's talk about how to flip that why into yes. What would make you stop and say, okay, now this is worth discussing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's real, tangible, concrete, demonstrable examples of where something will be better or will deliver more value. Don't be nebulous. Really find some things. Actually, finding examples of where things went wrong in the past that cost time, money, or bad decisions. If you can go, if only I had an immense treasury system here, that would have given me the answer to this problem earlier, or and I could have acted on it. It's really that's really key. I think demonstrating that there's a clear risk now by not having a system, and that clear risk is only going to get worse. It's going to grow, and if we don't do something about it, it has the potential to derail both the finance organization and the company altogether. Or demonstrating that without a system, there are blockers, and those blockers are going to stop the growth in the business because finance can't respond. We can't react to an M&A transaction and have funding ready, and we might lose the M&A transaction because we were too slow, or we missed a window of opportunity for locking in, at a fixed rate when there was a real market dislocation. Being proactive on that, again, going back to times when during the global financial crisis, we had our bonds were trading at 60 cents on the dollar, and yet we were the most stable revenue generating company with long-term contracts, my treasury team were absolutely on it and were in the market hearing when we could buy and moving really quickly. Having a good system to enable you to do that really helps.
Okay, so what signals tell you that the treasurer is thinking like a CFO?
I think the acid test is when the treasurer really understands how the business makes money, and genuinely, why do we earn the profit that we earn, and why do we win against the competition? What is it about our service or product which makes people want to buy from us rather than the competitor? And then understands the business risk. And I'm not talking about the financial risks here. I take that as a sine qua non. I'm talking about the business risks. So what is it about the competitive landscape that could upend our business? What is it about the technology scape or the regulatory scape, depending on business you're in? What is in that is going to give us a risk for the future? Because to me, that then demonstrates they're thinking like a broader, as you say, thinking like a broader leader, a broader business manager, like a CFO should think.
Okay, so if you were brutally honest, what do most treasurers get wrong when pitching up?
I think it's not selling the benefits, and what will be better, not explaining why the status quo can't endure. Look, the CFO is going to push back. The CFO is going to say, why don't we just carry on doing what we're doing? Use your lovely spreadsheets. You guys have got the knowledge. I understand that. You're on top of it. Isn't a problem I need to fix today. You need to make that problem real for the CFO such that it becomes compelling. And I don't want as a CFO to continue with this problem and this risk that it could all go wrong, or there's a great set of future better options out there which are demonstrable and are going to give me a real return on my investment. Yeah, that's what you've got to be focused on as a treasurer.
So, if you could leave the treasurers in our audience with one sentence to keep in mind before walking into that CFO's office, what would it be?
Well, I'll give you two sentences because I can't just do one. I think the first part of it is you must have clear, concise arguments of both the benefits of a new system and the clear risks of not doing anything. But just remember that CFOs are risk averse. So to be honest, fear is the stronger motivator for change. So just bear that in mind when you're going to present your case.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, we've now covered the why and the what next, but there's still one final piece to bring everything together, perhaps the most important one, the how. In our final session today, we'll look at the blueprint for building a value-first, zero-surprise treasury together with Alexander Fleischman. See you in a couple of minutes.